But many merchant service providers and agents have those kind of solutions for under, but it's really the dispensaries and the ones selling that are over that 0.03 where they have a more of a tough time getting an account, or they're just not aware of the
Oh yeah.
solutions out there.
Well, James, today we started off with one of my favorite subjects, selling to cannabis dispensaries.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
been waiting for this industry to come up with a viable alternative for doing that. I mean, we're talking about a business that it's making the states hundreds of millions of dollars. Who can
Right.
imagine how much it's making the store owners?
Right, exactly. It's time for payment processing to catch up a little bit there. And so
Yeah,
very
yeah,
interesting. I learned some things, obviously not my area of expertise, but something that I learned a lot about today. Then I go into the questions in the field and I talk about competing with Square and this idea of what does it really take to steal a merchant from Square and position them so that Square can never take them back. And
right.
it's really not, it's pretty, you're going to agree with me when I tell you, it's just that probably a lot of you are not doing it the way that I'm describing. So we dive into that. And then Patty, one of my favorite insiders reports, because one of my favorite things, kind of the culmination of years of conversation. So tell us about the insiders.
About a lawsuit against Visa for its ambiguity and get tough rules around surcharging and cash discounting.
Yep.
This is something we have not heard the end of. I think it's going to be probably one of our more contentious issues this year.
Yeah, I think so. I'm very excited to put as much weight as I can behind their effort, and they have a lot of work still to do to get the class action status and all of that. But very
Yeah,
interested to see how that all plays out for sure. So,
yeah, for
um,
sure.
with all that in mind, Glenn Kaplan, by the way, not a sponsor or paid advertiser, consultant, or anything like that. So, with that being said, let's dive into this interview with Glenn Kaplan. Hey, everybody! Patty and I are here today with Glenn Kaplan. How you doing today, Glenn?
Doing great. Great to be here.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us. We're going to talk today about the evolving payments landscape and specifically around the cannabis industry and some interesting things happening there. Before we dive into all of that, though, Glenn, I really want to get your story so you can share that with our audience. I know you have a long track record of being in this industry. So talk to us about how in the world you got into this crazy industry and what's kind of been your journey to this point.
Yeah, sure. I got in the industry in the 90s. So for those listening to this who have been in the business a long time and recall names like Harbridge and Cherry Payment and Peach Tree, I think it was, back in the very early days. And then I started my own merchant, MSP in 2001, register with Visa MasterCard. And previously I was in the insurance business for a brief period, did fairly well. I just didn't enjoy personally that industry, and got introduced to this business, and it was just my DNA all the way around. So
Yeah, that happens with a lot of us, I think. So,
yes.
so I know we wanted to talk about the cannabis industry, and I know you've been involved in this sector for a while, processing sector. Um, might be helpful to give our folks sort of a quick history lesson, okay? How the industry has evolved thus far, uh, how regulation is at a high level, pun intended, the federal versus the
No
state
pun
levels.
intended there, right?
Yeah, right. I had to say it was intended. But just sort of give us a sense in terms of, CBD versus THC products, for example, if you could give us a little.
Yeah. So, the business, well, let me preface with this. So, cannabis is one of our niches. We work with over 30 banks and financial institutions
Okay.
domestically and internationally. We write high risk of all sorts. And of course, we write low and medium risk businesses as well. But we have a lot of competitors that refer business. We turn into friends, send business to us that they
Uh-huh.
can't write. So we can kind of do all those things. And one of our niches is the cannabis space and CBD related merchants. And of course, you touched on regulation and different things. It's fluid, right? It's changing constantly. You have to stay on the cutting edge because what was true 2 months ago may not necessarily be true today. There's
Right.
different nuances with regulatory and laws and things. The processors, we have a handful of processors that we work with where we place most of our cannabis related businesses, dispensaries, CBD, et cetera, et cetera. And they cumulatively, the processors that we work with are processing for over 70% of all the dispensaries in the country. So they're doing it right. They all have kind of attorneys on hand and making sure everything's done properly because there's a whole lot in this industry where folks have gotten into business and then the merchants get shut off and they get on TMF, and it's really not their fault because it was the processor. So we're very careful to, and we have worked with, for years, the best in the industry as it relates to
Sure.
cannabis related businesses. So
yeah, I mean, it's like any businesses. There's, fly by nights, and there's some, people who've been around for a long time and do things right. But the industry's kind of a broad topic. So maybe we should break it down a little bit. Like maybe some of the various merchant types and how that is viewed in terms of payment processing.
absolutely. So, I mean, with cannabis related businesses or CBD, you have an array of different ways merchants are going to take card payments, and it is, mobile, walking into a local retail dispensary, for example, or a CBD store, hosted pages that can be set up. So there's a variety of different ways that merchants can take payments as far as cannabis related. And then we have a handful, I guess we'll probably get into this during our discussion, but a handful of different payment solutions for cannabis. We have full support from loans to payment accounts and a variety of other things. So we kind of full service related to cannabis. And we've been hot and heavy helping cannabis related merchants for about 3.5 years. And the processors we work with have, my ISO has been around since 2001, but as far as the niche of cannabis, and so we have like I said, we have a handful of processors we work with where we place our merchants with, and the business is growing, as you know, just dramatically, like 30% year over year, this business. So it's a great business to be in.
Why did you get into the cannabis industry? You mentioned like it was 3.5 years ago or whatever when you get into it. What kind of, was there a change in the market that prompted you to dive in? I'm not much of the expert in this area, so I'm kind of curious if there was a shift or you just found it, or why'd you get in then?
Yeah, so we have a network. We get 95% of our business from referral partners, family offices, associations endorse us, other ISOs, banks, et cetera, that refer. And one of our family offices that sent a large account over to us, they were talking about a multi-location dispensary merchant, and we started discussing. And then when I really delved down into it, it was just a no-brainer for me to have our company, really, full comprehensive research, full comprehensive solutions for this industry, because it's just an incredible industry and growing dramatically. And that's really what was the precipice. And I just started diving in and realized, wow, we need to set up some fantastic relationships so we can help these merchants. So because of the growth of this industry, so we wanted to make sure we had those solutions in place. So it was really one referral partner who sent us some business, and then that got us to kind of dive into all the particulars.
Cool. I know we mentioned this briefly just before the podcast began, but if you could just explain, what is a certificate of analysis and why is it important to setting up a payment processing account?
Yeah, so so for cannabis related businesses, the dispensaries, et cetera, it's a certificate that is the merchant receives when they describe their different products and services, and it really delineates down into the specific ingredients of the different products and services they're selling, and that certificate kind of okays it's legit product. And
so then you can therefore provide payment services to them if they have that.
Exactly.
Are there different levels that constitute different levels of risk, or is it just this line in the sand of like, if it's above this level it's illegal or it's not legit, and if it's below this level then it's fine? Like, is that how does that work?
Yeah, as far as there's the 0.03% THC, under this margin, you can see there can be embryonic small amounts of THC, which is under the law, where you see stores that will sell this just kind of over the counter. And we, of course, we have many solutions for that. But many merchant service providers and agents have those kind of solutions for under, but it's really the dispensaries and the ones selling where they're selling products that are over that 0.03, so THC and different cannabis related products, where they have a more of a tough time getting an account, or they're just not aware of the
Oh, yeah.
solutions out there.
I mean, I think that's definitely the case, and that's why we have people coming along with solutions like, cashless ATMs, or, I was in a dispensary the other day, I thought it was a small one because I live in a small town. They had 3 ATMs in there, and there were people at all 3 of them, and I'm thinking to myself, people, if you just went down the store down the street to Sheets, it would be free, but but I mean,
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? I mean, there's a lot of need in there, and a lot of people don't understand how to address that need, at least people in the cannabis industry.
and there's a lot of risk based with
Right.
having an ATM machine. Now we have ATMs that we'll place in dispensaries, and we have and do, but we kind of try to pull them away from that, because that just tells bad actors you
Tells
have
the
a bunch of
crooks where
cash.
right, people with a bunch of
Yeah.
cash.
You
It's
know,
one
You
of the
see
things.
something. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No,
No, the thing I was gonna say, it's interesting to me because like between the 3 of us, I'm definitely the novice in this area. So like, Glenn, can you just explain at a real high level to our audience, for those that like me who don't have this knowledge, like what is it about? I'm walking into a dispensary, it's physical location business, right? And I've done some research on it, but like, why is that high risk? Why are these businesses so hard to place? Like, what's the deal? And do you see that like changing? Like tell us more about kind of the big picture of it,
Yeah, it's really the juxtaposition between the federal laws and the respective state laws, and each state is different, and some have it's legal recreational, and the other one is it's medical only, another one doesn't, and
and it's also
it's
the
just
associations as they relate to those laws. I mean,
100%.
you know,
Yeah,
it could be legal in a state that, maybe the local ATM networks don't have a problem processing for, but a Visa or a MasterCard acquiring bank couldn't, because of the rules that are set up by
And
Visa and
so
MasterCard.
what you're saying though, as far as from a payment processing perspective, the reason they're hard to place is what? The fact that it's hard to find a bank that'll take it from a reputational perspective, or from a compliance perspective, or like what's making it hard to place from a payment processing perspective?
yeah. I mean, one is most banks and processors just don't want anything to do with it.
Okay.
And then and I don't consider it a very risky,
Right.
business
From
type.
a
It's
financial
pretty
perspective, it
simple.
doesn't seem like there's a lot of financial risk, at least to me.
There's a
Right.
risk in that, because there's so much cash and there's so much product that people would want, there's a risk to the owner of
Right,
burglary,
but not to the sponsor
but
bank.
not to the, no.
Yeah.
Well, it can be reputationally where they're not,
Yeah.
some have dabbled in it and don't really understand all the ins and outs from A to Z related to, and they don't stay on the cutting edge of what's going on in the industry. So what was, appropriate 2 months ago may not be appropriate. And you have to have processors who are really embedded in that space and have said, we want to understand this and we want to be able to underwrite these, but really know to do things as far as all of the legal literature and the TNCs and how it's approached, and the product or the service itself is, here's one thing. There's many things, but not many people realize that there's a couple debit networks that are owned in part by MasterCard.
Mhm.
So what happens is you have some processors who have dabbled. I'm not going to mention any names. We've had some recent stuff with some a couple big processors, but they just weren't embedded in the space enough to understand, all of kind of saw the money on the table, but they just didn't do things correctly. Whether, I'm not saying it was purposeful, but they just didn't realize.
Right.
But back to a couple debit networks that are owned in part by MasterCard, what happens is some of these cashless ATM solutions that have been recently turned off, and then there's been some news feed where people think, oh, you can't do cashless ATM. No, you can do cashless ATM as long as you're doing it correctly.
Right.
So what happened is they were running the debit transaction with the Visa, let's say check card or debit card or MasterCard, and it was run through one of the debit. So it's not touching Visa, MasterCard per se, but at the same time, MasterCard's not comfortable with that because it's still,
Right.
because it's just the industry right now. We just need more clarity, and
Yeah.
hopefully
Yeah.
we'll get that in the next year or two. But you have to have processors that, they're A+ rated processors and banks, and they have complete departments and
They know what
folks
they're
that
doing.
handle these kinds of businesses and know what they're doing. And that's,
Right.
that's who we work with. So.
Tell me though, Glenn, because I had heard at one point somebody in the business told me that they were told by Visa or MasterCard that if the debit card has a Visa or a MasterCard logo on it, then it's, even if it goes through a regional network, it's still considered a Visa or MasterCard card, and therefore they were
I'm
misinformed.
Yeah, because the largest dispensaries in the country are using
Yeah, the one I go to uses it right now. I mean, I
Yeah,
asked them and they said, no, our processor told us that this is totally legit. I'm like, okay.
yeah, it's really who you talk to, right? And
Right.
people, there's all sorts of stuff, until this gets really solidified in this industry, and with all the fluidity of the changes every month and everything gets kind of concrete and clear, there's going to be all these kinds of talk here and there. So, I mean, the only objection we ever get when we talk to a merchant is, is this legitimate? Because I
Right.
heard it's, you can't do this. And then
Right.
we give them some references and, a couple of our big dispensaries, and they've been processing for years and years.
Right.
So once they get that information, then they feel comfortable, and
So basically what you're saying is there, you do have solutions where if somebody has a, cannabis dispensary and, they meet whatever the criteria is, they can process these transactions using these cards. But there are some things where we got to be careful about what debit network we're going to run over, and a lot of that kind of idiosyncrasy or
Right.
expertise type stuff that we have to be mindful of. Is that what you're saying, Glenn?
Absolutely perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're real, and our processors that we work with, the only ones we work with are, like I said, they cumulatively, they're
understand it.
processing for most of the dispensaries, and they understand it.
Right.
Everything's, done
Yeah.
correctly, done
Right.
right.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
They have the processes and procedures in place for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's make this practical. So if I'm an agent, or maybe I'm a software company looking to get into the space or whatever it is, and I go out and I am, I want to go after physical location dispensaries. Glenn, give us a little flavor of like, what do you offer? What are the solutions that you have to offer? What's the kind of pitch to that, merchant?
Yeah, so it's really consultative, right? We talk to them, what are you looking for, and have a conversation, because we have a handful of solutions. And I can let me tell you what those are real quick, and then we can
Yeah, sure.
delineate, to kind of answer that. So we have point of banking, cashless ATM, certified solutions. We have a credit card program, which is backed by a public company we're contracted with, that a couple of the, those listening may know, some of these companies. I don't want to necessarily mention them, but two of the largest in the nation. They do over $1 billion in processing. Both of them, or one's close to $1 billion, the other is over $1 billion, and they've been using this credit card wallet program, which is a way to accept credit card using blockchain, and it's a closed loop transaction. So you're familiar,
Yep.
Patty.
Use that. Yeah. It's cool.
Yep. And they use that, and they usually will have a cashless ATM simultaneously, so two accounts. So they'll run some with the cashless ATM, some with the credit card. So that's second. We also have a Venmo Zelle type solution, which is really fantastic. And we can delineate into these different things. With those listening who can contact me, or on this call or another podcast, but it's a pretty tremendous solution. It's very simple. We set them up, we can brand it, and it literally functions behind the scenes identical to a Venmo. And so that's another
that's
solution
one I've been waiting for, this, because that seems to be perfectly suited for this particular.
It's so perfect. It's
Yeah.
so perfect.
Well, I
mean,
it's interesting to me, Glenn, because like the closed loop thing, it's just such a great idea in general. You know what I mean? It's being used in so many different ways in different
Mhm.
industries right now that, yeah, I mean, that seems like such a natural fit for this industry, especially when you have, motivated buyers and they're
Yeah.
probably more likely than others to say, hey, look, if you want a convenient way to pay, you're going to use our card or you're going to use our app.
Right.
I mean, I
Right.
imagine that it wouldn't be that difficult to get the consumer to adopt that method of payment.
Yeah, it's been a really exciting service that we've added, it's particularly for different industry types, other kind of high risk stuff that we do in gaming and just different stuff and
Uh-huh.
Right.
international and blockchain and crypto and all that. But as far as cannabis and CBD, it's a fantastic solution
Sure.
as well. And then we have full service. We have two contracts with two financial institutions who with a simple online app that we created kind of on the front end for this. Merchants go there, and particularly for dispensaries, they can apply for startup capital, especially expansion capital,
Nice.
and get an
Nice.
answer in 48 hours with 3 different programs to choose from. They pick A, B, C, and it's done. It's very simple. And I want to mention too, most all of our solutions I'm very much into automation and making things simple and
Sure.
tracked and easy and efficient. So like the point of banking service we have in the cashless ATM and the credit card wallet program and we have a gift card closed loop program I forgot to mention
Sure.
as well, and the Venmo equivalent that they can brand and different things. We have an online app. It's just so simple. So our partners will either with their affiliate link or referral partner link, or they'll just email a few bits of information. And if they need us to contact a merchant, we do explain everything to them. But as far as the boarding process,
Mm-hmm.
we don't charge anything to set folks up. And they go to a link, they put in a few bits of information, then they receive a DocuSign, they sign it. Within 48 hours, generally, it's approved, it's activated, the terminal's programmed and FedExed overnight. It's plug and play.
Sweet.
And for those listening that may not be aware of how generally with the dispensary payments work, it's not exactly, but to give you an idea, it's kind of like where in dual pricing for a merchant, where you're kind of passing on the fee to each
Right.
customer. It's similar within this industry. So
Right.
in essence, the merchant doesn't have to pay any fees.
Right.
They eliminated their security risks by getting rid of, if they want to, getting rid of cash on hand, because there's lots of, the news in this, people just break into
People are
dispensaries. So
being
they know there's cash.
killed and everything. Yeah.
So that eliminates it. There's no, and it's just a very simple boarding process. So it's all online, it's all tracked, it's all simple. It's a simple service to explain to the merchant. And we've made it a no-brainer. It's going to make them obviously a bunch more money. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
cost anything. It's all
Mm-hmm.
online. There's no paperwork. It's just
Yeah,
so
that's cool.
yeah.
So I guess one other thing to touch on here is let's talk for a minute about a merchant who wants to sell these products online. Now, does that, are there a different set of solutions or maybe an adaptation of what you have now? And also maybe you can help our listeners understand, does that make the merchant like a higher risk merchant as it does with traditional processing? So maybe talk about that a little bit.
Maybe not higher risk, but there's more for them to know to make sure they're following everything
Sure.
correctly.
Okay.
And that question is merchant dependent, depending on what they're doing, how they're doing, the merchant
Right.
themselves, because we can set up posted pages for them. And in some of the solutions I mentioned, like we have 5, 6 solutions for dispensaries, kind of went through that category. There's a couple of those solutions where they can set up a hosted page and they can capture the card, and then they take a mobile terminal with them, deliver, like if it's a delivery,
Mm-hmm.
and then once it's delivered, then the transaction goes through. But if it's something where they're looking to take the transaction before they're delivering the product to the customer, then typically that Venmo equivalent solution I told you about is going to be most appropriate for that. So that's why we have just kind of all the different solutions, because some dispensaries just need cashless ATM. It's going to be the best for them. Some need cashless ATM and credit card. And that credit card program, it does not need I forgot to mention, these are regular credit cards.
Mhm.
Okay, cashless ATM, it's the PIN debit. They have to put their code at their 4-digit, but this is different. And again, anyone listening that wants to reach out, I can kind of delineate and give the specifics. But basically, with the card program, you can take regular Visa, regular MasterCard, regular Discover, regular American Express. And the way it works, again, I go into detail why it's what kind of solution it is, and it checks off everything that needs to be done according to rules and regulations. So.
Sure.
But we can set up, to your question, we can set those up. It doesn't make it more risk. It just means that the merchant may need an additional product
Got it.
to be. They can't run the credit card program or the point of banking with that scenario. But that's why we have that other solution, so they can.
Got it.
Right,
Okay.
right. Gotcha.
Well, so my last question, let's zoom out and we'll forget about the cannabis industry for a moment. And I know that, you're involved in so many other things. Obviously, you're, 30 years in the payments industry. None of us has a crystal ball, but let's say that you did, and you're looking into the next like 3, 5, 10 years in the payment space. What do you see? What is the, give us the short answer of like, top trend, or what are you seeing that's interesting to you as you see this evolution continue in our industry?
Outside of cannabis,
That could be cannabis, just whatever's interesting to you right now in payments.
I think there's so many things. There's
Yeah.
just that we are in the most transformative
Yeah.
time, in my opinion, in
Mhm.
payments in the world, and so many different things, economic system and currency, and just there's so many things changing with blockchain. And so one of the things that really excites me, and we've been working on for a couple years, to be able to capture what's happening and be able to, when as the change is taking place, have the solutions for those merchants. And that is on-ramp, off-ramp technologies, whereby we can embed payments into, let's say there's an international metaverse company, and they're gaming, and they're buying tokens. And I'll give you a real world example. There's one we're working on and we're co-branding. They process about $10 million a month, but they have tremendous limitations on who they take payment from and how it's done. So let me give you an example. Let's say there's somebody in Singapore, and they want to use Singaporean dollars, and they want to purchase tokens, or they want to purchase something. Basically, an on-ramp, off-ramp system is the ability for anyone around the world who is to purchase from that merchant's store or services. In the gaming example I gave, where they can pay in any of their respective fiat currency, whether, like I said, whether it's the British pound or whatever, and then they can buy in whatever currency they want, and they can receive money back in whatever, I mean, within limits, that not every fiat currency in
Right, of
the
course.
world, but the ones that are the legitimate ones. So they can purchase in whatever fiat, or purchase in whatever legitimate crypto. There's probably about 20, 30, 40 crypto that are really legitimate, with major utility, backed by billion-dollar companies. So
Right.
they can purchase in whatever fiat or whatever crypto, and then when they receive money back, they can have it in a different fiat, US dollar, or
Sure.
Bitcoin, or XRP, or that kind of
Wow.
thing. And it's all kind of like this, and it's pretty significant. And that's, in my opinion, I think this is one of the most transformative things. And so what's happening is merchants are going from being able to accept payments from, like, say it's a US business, from US cardholders, and some international, how that can be segmented as higher risk, and then there's a non-qualified fee. This is different, but they have limited customers, because it's only in the US. So what this is doing is opening up the world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anybody can
anybody.
purchase
Mhm.
with whatever they want, just with their phone. And there's Africa is up and coming. I mean, we're going to see incredible, like a level playing field, and people be able to have global reach of customers all around the world, and not have to have any expensive. They just need their phone. And this is a big change. So what we've done is we've contracted with multiple international financial institutions who are embedded in this space, and we're able to capture. So when we have a referral partner, or a rep that refers business, or an ISO, or whomever, or a merchant calls us directly, this is going to become more common, and it is every single day. And
Yeah.
I could see in like a year from now, literally, James and Patty, like so quickly things are doubling and multiplying. It's just kind of
Yeah.
incredible.
Right,
Where
right.
we have these services where we're able to capture this business to give these services to these merchants, and we want to be payments for blockchain, payments for metaverse, and that's where so much is going, and that's
Yeah.
what a lot is changing in that regard.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
going to
super
be
interesting.
really interesting.
Yeah. Well, everybody, again, that's Glenn Kaplan, so CEO at Charge Today. Glenn, before we let you go, if somebody wants to learn more, they want to contact you or your company, where would you send them?
Yeah, just go to chargetoday.com. But if you want to email me, my email is simple, Glenn, Glen, at chargetoday.com.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Glenn, thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise with us. Really appreciate it.
You got
Yeah,
it. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Really enjoyed it, Glenn. Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. Good seeing you again.
So, Patty, this episode of the Merchant Sales Podcast is brought to you by Nativia, and specifically Nativia Banking. So,
Yes.
I talk in this episode about the idea of, verticalization of other services, not just payments. And we're going to see
Right.
that same thing with banking. And I talked about that
Yes,
a
we
little bit.
are.
So
Yeah.
I think, this idea of other services that are going to come in, we have to remember that the wheel, or the main center of all of this moving forward, is going to be vertical specific software solutions.
Right.
And so when we think about things like payment processing, we got to start thinking more broadly about banking and other financial services.
Yeah.
that are gonna be
Financial
embedded.
services, payment processing is just one piece of financial services, and we need to have a bigger chunk of that.
We do. So if you want to learn more about that, head over to nativia.com/banking. You could also head over to nativia.com/ISO. It's ISO, just to learn more about their ISO program, how you can sell banking services to your clients and make money. So, Patty, today I want to talk about, I was going to entitle it "How to Compete with Square," but I think that's the wrong, that's not really intense enough. I almost feel like it's how to
Right.
destroy Square in a particular vertical.
I have a Square kind of thing going on my
Oh,
on
do ya?
mine too. So this will be a
All
Square
right.
day.
Well, there you go. Fantastic. Yeah. So I had this really interesting thought, Patty. And I'm going to share, I think, either next week or maybe the week before this airs, I'm going to have my whole 2024 prediction thing. But, I was thinking about something interesting over the holidays. So I talk a lot about CC Storage on the podcast. It's an ISV that I own, and we serve self-storage property owners. And so, for a self-storage property owner, right, we have, a site map with a layout of their property, what it would look like from the sky. We have very specific functionality around leases. We have an integration with gates. So, like when you go, the gate has to open in order to get into the
Right.
property.
Right.
There's a certain kind of insurance that has to be integrated in for, right, for people who want to insure the contents of their unit. So I could go on and on,
Sure.
right?
Mhm.
All these different specific things. So here's the interesting question that I posed to my team, and that was this: is that company going to steal customers from Square? Yes. We do it all the time, right? They're currently using a little swiper on their phone, small self-storage property. Our software is, basically free. And so are we stealing people from Square? Yes, we do it every day. But here is the question I had. Is Square ever going to steal a customer from us? No,
I don't think so.
it's never going to happen. Like,
No.
why on earth? Like, Square doesn't have a sitemap. They don't have a gate integration. They don't have this special integration with the kind of,
All they have is
right?
that little dongle thing, pretty
Right.
much,
No,
right?
but I mean, really, they have a lot now when you think about it, as far as their general point of sale solution.
Well, yeah, they do have loans and stuff like
Yeah,
that
they have all
too,
these things.
right?
But what really kind of hit me in a way that it hadn't hit me before was just the danger that even Square is in when you think about verticalization. And when I look at a company like building an ISV, and I'm like, wow, this is nuts. Like, think about in 3 years, we're going to have our own, I'm sure probably before that, we'll have CC Storage banking. So it'll be like,
Sure.
if you have a self-storage property, you're going to have your bank account so that your transactions can go right into it. And we'll have an integration with a bank where we'll be doing lending. You're going to go buy your next self-storage property. Well, we have banking set up where you can borrow the money for that, because we would have a specialized integration where there's a bank who specifically knows, hey, if you get a deal from us, it's to buy a self-storage property. So we have all the right questions to ask. Square Capital isn't going to compete with that. They're not going to have a specialized way to borrow money to do a self-storage property. So what really hit me is this, Patty, you know, that scenario I just described, every vertical in the country is going to experience this shift over the next decade.
Right.
And there's going to be a software that Square can't compete with in that vertical because, you know, now again, does that mean everybody's going to go to a vertical specific solution? No, of course not. Things move slowly, but I think in 10 years, you know, I really believe that the companies like Square and many others are really going to be more of a platform on which software companies can build. And the challenge, you know, vertical specific software companies, but the challenge there is going to be, you know, those vertical specific software companies, they're going to want to make money from the payment processing. And so it's something I've been thinking about a lot. And I think that, you know, this idea of, you know, you go out in the field and you're like, how do I compete with Square? Well, it's not about the processing. If you want to compete with Square, ironically, it's about the features. And if in your mind you're thinking to yourself, James, you got to be kidding me. We're trying to catch up to Square. Like we're not even offering the features that Square is offering. That should be a huge red flag to you.
Red flag.
And it should be, wait a second. You know, it's funny, right before this podcast interview, Patty, I talked for a few minutes to a 22-year-old college student who just got into the industry, reached out to me, and I was like, oh, this will be fun. So I talked to him for a few minutes, and, you know, he's like, you know, I'm in college. I'm just getting into payments. What should I do? And I was like, that's easy. Pick an industry, a vertical that you like, learn everything you can about it, read industry publications, and then find the right solution for them with integrated payments. Become the expert at that vertical, and maybe in the next 10 years, you'll pick up one or two more verticals. You know, that's what you do right now as you get into payments. And the challenge is going to be for those that are already in payments, right? How do they make this transition to a focus on specific verticals? But anyway, all that to say, the way you compete with Square and really destroy them in terms of a vertical is going to be providing features and integrations that are specific to a vertical that Square does not have. That is, in my opinion, the best way and really the only way to compete with companies like Square. So I think they're maybe not in quite the unattainable position that we think. It's just we're thinking of it in terms of how do we compete with processing, and that's the wrong way to compete. You compete with vertical specific features and solutions.
Yeah, excellent idea. So Visa has found itself on the receiving end, and I know, James, you and I have spoken about this before, but Visa's found itself on the receiving end of a legal challenge to its surcharging and cash discounting rules.
Yes.
MyCamp Solutions, an Arizona-based financial technology firm and a leading ISO, filed a class action suit against Visa in U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California on behalf of itself and other ISOs that are hamstrung by difficult-to-follow regulations and the penalties levied around surcharging and cash discounting. The complaint alleges that Visa actions to stamp out surcharging and cash discounting have been anti-competitive and allowed the company to gain a monopoly in the payment space. You know, as we know, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say a little teaser there. So we have, you know, James Huber, Global Legal Law Firm. They're the ones who filed this on behalf. And then Micah, who is the president at MyCamp. Both of them I know really well. And so I believe I've been in contact, but I believe we're going to be able to get both of them on a episode in the near future to really discuss this in more depth.
Yeah. I spoke with James after he filed this. We had a sort of a back and forth.
Yep.
We didn't get to speak a long time, so because I have a bunch more questions I'd love to ask. So
yeah, sure. Yep.
We will definitely get to that. But, you know, as we know, cash discounting and surcharging have not set well with Visa. You know, earlier this year, Visa lowered the cap on permissible credit card surcharging from 4% to 3%, which of course is lower than permissible surcharges in some states and can be lower than the all-in cost of processing, you know. Visa's also gone after dual pricing merchants dispatching, quote, secret shoppers to identify those that don't abide by Visa rules, such as the way the prices are displayed, levying fines on those that don't do it right. And I think it's interesting. The law suit likens these to criminal penalties, and I think there's a lot to be said for that, you know?
Yeah.
In fact, here it said, here's a quote: Visa's use of paid employees, or as Visa has coined them, secret shoppers, to audit merchants and enforce its surcharge rules is akin to utilizing privately paid police officers to effectuate its goal of continuing to assess quasi-criminal penalties on ISOs.
Yeah.
I thought that was
Yeah.
pretty good. Then it goes,
is.
well, this is
Yeah,
ridiculous. We've talked about this before
Yeah.
that, what is non-compliance? I mean, the rules are constantly changing and confusing.
Yeah.
In
Yep.
terms of, how it can, how do you show that a consumer, how something is being charged? I saw one example, and I believe it was in the lawsuit that said everybody should do it the way gas stations do it. But gas stations don't do it that way inside.
Right. Right. Well,
Right?
and the other thing too is obviously that's a ridiculous assertion, right? Because gas stations are different than other business types. Like
Yeah, they
that's
are.
that I mean, and I had a long conversation with a reporter, a journalist from a publication yesterday about this because at the end of the day, Patty, it's this is like I love what the suit talks about because these are private companies trying to
Yes.
enforce rules on the private companies. If
Right.
a private company believes that another private company has violated their contractual agreement, you go to court.
Right.
You don't send your enforcement, your private, enforcement
Agents
agency.
out.
Like,
Right.
no, it's that you're not a government agency. And I think that as much as I admire what Visa and MasterCard have accomplished in a lot of areas, I think in this particular area, I think maybe they've gotten a little out of control here and we're now arbitrarily enforcing, rules around free speech and things of that nature. This belongs with the government. This does not belong with a private company. We've stepped
Right.
way, and it's like a
They've
weird
stepped way
thing.
far out on this one.
Yeah.
And one of the things, these fines, as the MyCamp lawsuit points out, most of these fines are so draconian that the average merchant can't pay them. So
Right.
the ISO's paying them, and then
Yep. Because
losing out on that.
they don't want the negative PR of,
Of course
passing it
not.
on to a merchant, right? And
You know,
yeah, it's an interesting one, Patty. I
they
mean, well, anyway, I'm sure you have more on it, but
I
it's
just
been
have
very
one
interesting.
other example I wanted
Yeah.
to use. They use in the press release discussing this. James and his crew related the story of an Arizona merchant that was a client of my camp. They tried to recoup their card fees to fund after school programs for underprivileged kids. Visa claimed the merchant failed to comply with its rules for dual pricing and fined Mein Camp $70,000 for the infraction. Now, when my camp appealed the fine, Visa allegedly initiated secret shopper visits to more than 1,800 of my camp's clients.
Yep.
That's like,
Yep.
yeah,
And I mean,
that's draconian. I'm sorry.
well, and again, to give a little timeline here, Patty, right? I think most in the industry can remember us talking about this alert that came out quite a while back, about over a year ago, of hey, if you have any merchants that are doing any of these programs, the sponsor bank, they said you have to submit that information to Visa.
Right.
It was a requirement, and so everybody in the industry kind of just bowed to that and was like, okay, sure. Here's our list of all of our merchant locations and which ones are doing which programs, right? And I think there was obviously a belief there that, hey, this isn't going to be used, ill intent or something
Yeah,
like that.
right.
Not the case. Visa really, at least it appears
It
that
appears that way.
they've
Yes.
turned around and said, well, hey, if you're going to push back on fines, we have the list of all your merchants that are doing these programs. So we're going to send our little private police force out and right and check on all these merchants and see how many fines we can build up.
Yeah.
There was one company I know of that ended up getting fined well over $1 million from that one of those efforts. So yeah, it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think, as James pointed, not this James, but James Huber pointed out,
Yeah.
lawsuit marks a significant turning point, in the ongoing narrative, potentially, carrying far-reaching implications for ISOs, merchants, and consumers. Because, one of the points that they made in this lawsuit that I thought was very interesting is by not allowing merchants to surcharge or offer cash discounts, Visa, in effect, is not allowing merchants to tell consumers how much it costs to take a Visa card.
Well, that's exactly what it is. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
doubt at all, right? That's
Yeah.
there
I
is
mean, but
no
it's like,
other
oh, well,
reason.
yeah, we don't want you to, we just
Right.
want you to sit silent and take this cost.
Right. And I think,
And that's,
I think the interesting thing to me is there's this argument on there's a counter argument to this that I hear from a lot of people in the industry when I talk about this is that um hey, it's the ISOs and sponsor banks have all agreed to these terms. They're all in the contract of Visa
yeah, but
rules. But I think that there's a point at which you can say, well, wait a second, what was the alternative? It's almost like
mhm,
getting a confession under duress. It's like,
right.
what am I supposed to do? I'm in the payments industry. Visa rolls out new rules. I'm supposed to say no. What?
Well,
How?
but
How,
the,
how
but
do
the
I do
other
that?
issue is too, James, the rules are so convoluted. They're so difficult to pin, to
Right.
to pin down. That's another problem right there.
Right.
I
Right.
mean,
And
how
so
can you follow rules that are ambiguous?
right, and again, there are fundamental, protections in the US in terms of how far a private company can go. I mean, if I sign an agreement saying that, this company can do something, I mean, like a really good example of this, I think, Patty, would be you look at what's happened in kind of the merchant cash advance world and some of the hard
Mm-hmm.
money lending, right?
Right.
Where the courts have come in and said no, you can't. I don't care that they signed a contract that they're going to pay you 47% interest. They're
Right.
not.
Right.
That's
You
that's
just can't do that.
ridiculous. You can't do that. And I think this is one of those same types of things where there's two questions in my mind. The first one is, do these rules push way too far into the rights of the merchant and the ISO to a point
Right.
where it's like, no, you're a private company. You're not a government agency. You actually don't
Mm-hmm.
get to demand what a merchant gets to speak to their customer. No.
Right.
And
Right.
the other thing is, it's like, yeah, all these companies agreed to them, but what was the alternative? We're in the payments industry. What, we're supposed to not offer Visa? Like, come on, this
Mm-hmm.
is crazy. So I think there's like a duopoly, anti-competitive thing here,
Well,
and then
yeah.
there's so
And I think it's also interesting that Visa's the one that's been making all this noise. It's not the other brands.
right, right. They're more than happy to sit back, I think, and let
Sit back
Visa
and let Visa take
take the
the
flack. Yeah. So
yeah.
I'll be very interested. I'm I don't know. I think one thing that I think Visa has maybe not fully thought through or anticipated yet, in my opinion, is the blowback from the merchant. So far it's been the ISO industry because our industry has really protected the merchant
For
from all of
protecting the
this.
merchant, but I don't think the industry can continue protecting the
No,
merchant at this cost.
no, and what's happening now is more and more merchants that I talk to are like, look, I'm never going to get rid of this program. Like,
Why
I'm
would I?
saving.
Yeah.
It's funny. I actually made a post. I think it's going to go up on social media soon. But I went to a merchant location recently, Patty, and the sign said, "We add a 4% convenience fee to all credit and debit transactions. This is in addition to the regular price." Like the worst, most non-compliant sign I've ever seen in my life. You know what I mean? It was like it's not a convenience fee. You're adding it to debit. It's greater than 3%, and it's greater than the regular price. I mean,
Oh,
right.
oh,
So
oh.
I know the owner, and I just was
Okay,
like, hey
good.
man, like, you know what I mean? And I was
Right.
like,
I've
hey, and
done
I
the
was
same thing. Yeah.
and I was like, hey, you need to, like, this is a red flag. And I was like, hey, just out of curiosity, like, how long has this been here? And he's like, 3 years. And I was like,
No.
and I said, how much pushback have you
And
gotten from customers? And he said, none. Once every 6 months, somebody says, hey, why are you charging me extra? And we waive the fee and move on. And he's like, hasn't hurt our business at all. Like
yeah. But all he
that
needs is
guy.
one of those secret shoppers to
Well,
stop by his shop.
but
Yeah.
my point is that
Yeah.
guy, and this is like a 20 location pizzeria. When
Ooh.
that guy gets that fine, and you know what I mean,
Oh yeah.
he is gonna be
He's gonna
livid.
be yeah.
He's gonna call his representative.
Yep.
It's gonna be a problem. And the thing that Visa is not understanding is you can go and push the ISOs all you want, but this train has already left the station a long time ago.
And that's the point about interchange that they've never understood. They see it as an ISO issue or as a big merchant issue. It's a mom and pop issue.
Right. Right.
And they
And
don't
to try
see
to
this as a mom and pop. And those
right.
mom and pop merchants have got the ear of their lawmakers.
Yes, they do. And when they try to pull this back and they say, hey, no, you can't do this anymore. You can't offer these types of programs to the merchant. These merchants are going to have a fit. And I already can tell you
Yes.
there's been, I had one recently. I was talking to a small ISO, and he specializes in working with large like restaurants and things. And they had a merchant that was ready to hire an attorney and sue Visa over a fine, and the I started kind of talking them down like, oh,
Oh yeah, that's not
let's just change your menu a little bit, and then let's just see how that goes, right? But I'm telling
right.
you, they were like, look, we will not go back. Like we are. And so I think there's that kind of US small business spirit there that's going to be
Mm-hmm.
at, that's going to come into play here at some point. And I think
You
Visa,
got how many millions of them, and there's only
yep,
one Visa.
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But I really believe that differential pricing and this idea of charging different rates for different payment methods, it's here to stay. And
Yeah,
so
yeah, that like you said, that train left the station a couple
yeah,
years ago.
yeah. So, well, good
It's
stuff. Patty.
kind of
Definitely,
funny too, James. I
yeah,
was at I guess it was about 3 years ago. I was at maybe it was an NEAA, one of the regional
yeah,
conferences, and they said, "What do you think? Look at the year ahead. What do you think the big deal is going to be?" I said, "Dual pricing." Oh no, no, no! And of course, there
yeah.
was a Visa and a Mastercard guy on the panel, so and here we are, and it's like, yeah,
Yep. Yep. And it's gonna go further now. It's gonna get into integrated payments, and it's gonna be
oh
a part
yeah,
of
oh
part of
yeah,
embedded payments moving forward and stuff. I mean, they're never gonna get rid of it. It's here to stay. So
yeah,
well, definitely keep us posted on anything you hear about this. And again,
sure
we'll
thing.
plan to have James Huber and or Micah Kinsler on the podcast coming up soon to talk about this as well and get their thoughts.
That
So.
would be great.